Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the University at Albany. It is certainly a pleasure and an honor to have all of you here today discussing this very, very important topic. Dan, thank you so much, and thank you to Albany County for organizing this very important meeting. I want to thank all the panelists as well for your engagement. This is quite a big panel here, so we have different viewpoints and different ideas, but the main goal remains the same. How do we continue to enhance and improve the safety of our students, the safety of our communities? And I think this is an initiative that requires a partnership among all the participants. And so this is a community endeavor. We need to work collaboratively, we need to work collectively in order to ensure that we continue to address these critical issues for our community. So once again, I hope you have a very, very productive workshop. Thank you so much for being here. The University at Albany is your home, so you're always welcome here. Once again, Dan, thank you so much.
You know, as a father of three, when I started talking to my children, and my 13-year-old says, "Hey Dad, we're going to do a walkout, and we're going to go outside for 17 minutes. I'm like, what do you hope to achieve? And why is the school letting you out? And you know, my mind as a parent, I'm going, why is everyone walking out of the schools? And we're broadcasting this across this nation. Everyone's going to be outside the schools. And is there going to be security? Is there going to be police there? You know, and what do you hope to achieve? And we had a little bit of a discussion. And the reality is, a lot of these kids are lost right now. They don't know how to answer that question and how can we address it. And you look at what happened in Colorado, Connecticut, Florida. Everything that's going on is the reasons why we have to have these discussions, but I don't want to be in this county and capital district reactive. I want to be proactive. And the only way we're going to be reactive is to get a panel like this together to have a frank discussion from law enforcement, from the education side, from the student side, you know, from the mental health side, because what's contributing to what's going on around in this world right now. And, you know, and there's a variety of things you can look at, but you have to look at the statistics and you have to dive into it. Is it video gaming? These video games, Xbox, Call of Duty, all these games these kids are playing living in this fantasy world, they spend 18, 20 hours a day gaming, living in a fantasy world. Is that contributing to it? Is it mental health? What's the breakdown? I said the easy solution, you know, and it was a hard discussion as a father to have with my daughter saying, yes, maybe we do need different gun control, maybe we need to get rid of automatic guns. But the reality is that the answer? Is that what's contributing to everything? Is that just one variable of the problem? So we have to put, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. We have to put it all together to make it work. And the only way that's going to happen by having these discussions and really making the whole community part of the solution. And the only way the community is going to be part of the solution is by having these uncomfortable conversations. And people will agree or disagree, and we can point fingers at everybody and saying it has to be this, it has to be that. But the bottom line is we have to do something different in this community. And we have to do something different around this country. And we have to have this discussion. And this is going to be one of many discussions we have to continue. Kind of like the healing moments I've done in Albany County. Bringing people together to discuss a topic that no one really knows the answer. And we do have a great panelist there with a lot of knowledge and a lot of effort into the community. And the other thing I was looking at as county executive, you have different law agencies in Albany County that go out in the community and do great work, day in and day out. You know, from the Sheriff's Department, from Colony to Albany PD to Gilliland to Waterville, Green Island, I could go on through all of them. But trying to do the same mission to accomplish a safer community. What better way to come together with resources, working together with the mental health community, the students, the University of UAlbany, and everybody to have a better outcome. And to me, that's what this discussion today is about. I'm not the expert, and I really kind of realized that talking to a 13-year-old, but I couldn't really, as a father, forget being the county executive, as a father, explain to her how I can make her feel better and how I can make her feel safer. You know, and her not knowing the answers. And it's, you know, as a parent, you don't want to look at your kids and say, I really don't have the full answer. I don't. More metal detectors, more screening of kids coming into schools, more ways of doing things. And we have a variety of stuff that we're going to be launching in Albany County that's going to help some of this social media. Because the social media, I don't know about you parents, I have a hard enough time keeping up with 3 kids, and it keeps changing. Well, no, Facebook's for your generation. Dad, I go, my generation. I thought Facebook was your generation. No, we're on Instagram and all this other stuff. And I'm like, wow, okay, I can learn something today. But you're not here to hear me talk. And I do have the honor of having our moderator, and Ms. Kim, Dr. Kim Wilkinson, who was our intern superintendent principal and going to schools where my kids went through and had the experience of working with her, who has a vast knowledge of all this, who's going to moderate today, and we couldn't find a better partner than you. And I can't thank you enough for doing this for me and being part of the solution. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you will. Thank you.
Very serious conversation. First of all, I want to thank our county executive and give him another round for So I start out saying good morning again. I'm honored to be part of this dynamic discussion today on school safety. Personally, this has always been, I want to say a pet peeve of mine as a teacher, as an assistant principal, a principal, and then as interim superintendent. There's several people on the panel. I will go until the end of the panel because I was in their office quite frequently around school safety because it really is that important. So we really want to have a frank discussion. It's obviously an issue that's in the forefront right now with our national concern conversation around the horrific school shooting that has actually occurred in Parkland, Florida. So what's really, really nice about this conversation, believe it or not, is that our county executive is not doing this as a one and done moment. He's really looking at this as being the catalyst for the future and what we do around school safety. So this will not be the only time we come together, but not just for discussion. He's talking about doing some actual action around this. So don't raise your hands now because we're probably going to be on a committee at some point. And really talk about effective action around school safety. So moving us along, we have some wonderful panelists that are going to be with us today representing education, students, mental health professionals, our law, of course, local law agencies, as well as state ed. So I'm going to have our panelists actually introduce themselves and the agency that they actually represent. And then we'll go right into some questions. And we also have all right, introduce yourself because he's my co-conspirator here.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom Pitcher-Durant, I'm Associate Principal at Colony High School, and I'm happy to be here and be part of the solutions, and we'll be working in and around everyone, trying to get some of your thoughts, but more specifically your questions out so that the panelists can have time to react and respond and get their professionalism and their expertise out back into the audience, and we can kind of chew on that a little bit more and come back full circle and have an open-ended discussion as we see the vision of Mr. McCoy come together. So thank you.
Thank you. And so with that, we want to start with our students who are always, can we get a round of applause for our two students? Start the introductions now.
Hello, my name is Patrick Ethier. I'm from Watervliet High School, and I'm a senior.
Hi, I'm Asma. I'm a senior at Shaker High School. Good morning, I'm Jill Penn. I'm the principal of Forest Park Elementary School in South Colony School District.
I'm Brian Bailey, I'm the superintendent of the Lead Improvement Selkirk.
Renee Ryder, I'm an associate commissioner at the New York State Education.
Good morning, Maura Manning, Albany County Department for Children, Youth, and Families, Deputy Commissioner, and we operate the Children's Mental Health Services in the county.
Good morning, I'm Steve Giordano, I'm the Director of the Mental Health Department in Albany County.
Andrew Shank, past president of the New York Association of School Psychologists and professor of school psychology at St. Rose.
Good morning. My name is Dolores Cimini. I'm a licensed psychologist and the director of the Center for Behavioral Health Promotion and Applied Research and Counseling and Psychological Services at the University at Albany.
Good morning, Mike Woods, Deputy Chief of Police, College Police Department.
Good morning, Bob Sears, Acting Chief of Albany Police Department.
Greg Apple, Sheriff.
We are discussing school-related shootings and school safety, but how are we, schools, addressing the nearly 10,000 day-to-day issues such as assaults, including assaults with knives, rape, sexual assaults, violent harassment, beatings, fighting, robberies, and the ever-present bullying? How are we addressing those in the schools? So I'm going to start right here with our students first because they're actually in the midst of schools, and then any of the panelists just jump on board. So.
I start off by we've been starting off having an officer come around schools. He's stopping, doing routine stops. But also, we're starting off with, we're moving to the proactive side. So we're getting into a lot of involvement with the students. So we're trying to get them involved in clubs and activities. We're a big fan of passing on the hashtag, if you will, for We Are Elite. So that means that we're a family, and so we don't let any bullying, no sitting alone at tables, at lunch tables, because we're doing mix-it-up lunches to get people to meet new friends and remove the sitting alone, because that will stop the bullying. We're a no place for hate school, so that's another thing we're trying to move in, push into the classrooms and teach our kids and our classmates about not bullying and what to do with when they see an issue like this and how to prevent that.
So it sounds like you all are being very proactive around the whole issue of harassment and bullying. So you feel that it's being addressed at your school at this point?
Yeah.
Hi, so I go to Shaker, and for those of you who don't know, it's a pretty large high school. We have over 2,000 students, and I'm going to say it is a little bit easy to get lost at Shaker because there's so many kids, and we're not a knit community just because we have so many kids, but I think something that we really push at Shaker is that if there's something wrong, you need to tell somebody, and I think that it's really being told to the students that don't keep it inside, because if somebody is harassing you or bullying you or telling you something that is degrading to you, you need to reach out. And that's a message that I want all students to hear, because keeping it inside is not the answer. And last year there was a student who called another student a terrorist, and I did not appreciate that. And I went to the principal, and action was taken. And I think that all these things are happening and the adults don't know about it. And the first step to stopping it is communication. And I think teachers at Shaker are really, really open and understanding, and even my principal and the other administrators in the North Colony District are super understanding of what's going on inside the schools. They're not a step away. They're in it with us, and they're trying to help us all the way through. So I think communication is really what we're trying to push.
Thank you. It's really important about communication. It was very impressive that you mentioned your administrators being involved, and you know what's going on with that at this point, so it's wonderful. Great, great. Any of the panelists want to address this issue?
Certainly. I think as an elementary principal, we have the onus of responsibility to start the kids out on a positive note and send that message that they need to value one another and who they are as individuals, as opposed to bullying or identifying the differences. We have to establish a community where we trust everybody and where we're open to the differences and accepting of one another. And as adults, we need to model that each and every day. And as the principal, I think it's important that I not only know my families, but I know my kids by name. If they come into my building and they know that I am aware of who they are, they have that open communication with me, it's more likely that they'll seek out an adult, myself, someone else in the building, and ask for help. And if we start that when they're 5 years old and walking in the door as kindergartners, when they get to the high school where those problems certainly do elude the principals, they elude the teachers, the kids are outnumbering us. If the kids don't know that they can trust school administrators or they can trust the educators, then the problems will continue. And I think that's our job the second they walk in the door.
Thank you. A really important word that our principal mentioned was about trust. Trust in this whole conversation. Anybody else in the panelists want to address this?
Well, just in terms of the context of all this still is that schools are still the safest place for children. That you have this great environment that's going on, but we have these incidents that cause alarm, and we just want to make things safer. And I think you brought an important point, Jill, in terms of just how do the adults actually work with each other? And do they create safety for each other? How often, for those educators here going to a teacher lounge, you may not feel so safe in being there. Well, if there's not safety amongst the adults, then how could there be safety amongst the kids? And how can we start to include all those people and to include all the various mental health workers? That do they know what mental health workers actually do? Do they know what a school psychologist do? Do they know what a social worker is? Can they be out there? Is it acceptable for kids and also teachers to be able to go visit with them? That it's okay to kind of go to psychologists and to work with those folks at the end of the day.
You know, that goes right into one of the questions that we had marked on here. What can a school do to address student mental illness?
It's a small question.
Okay, all right, yes.
Oh,
Okay. Where's the microphone?
you're right there, you got it.
Okay, so we have students at the college end of things. And so our job as mental health professionals and as prevention professionals is to take what we call a public health approach and provide students with comprehensive services, not only to address mental health concerns after they occur, but also to do what we can to prevent those concerns. So certainly when a college student or a high school student has a diagnosed mental health concern such as depression and anxiety is really on the rise these days, that we have the treatment in terms of assessment, in terms of therapy and availability of medication when needed for those students that benefit from those things. We also need to take a look at things that might co-occur with mental health concerns, such as alcohol and drug abuse, which is certainly a concern both in high school and college, and also violence and histories of sexual assault and sexual abuse and that kind of thing. And so for those students in the more general population, what we want to do too is intervene early. We want to teach our academic advisors and coaches and people who work closely with students what the signs are for mental health concerns, and teach them to ask the questions that are so important to those students, and then refer them to the help that they need. And at the universal level, we need to work with the entire population of college students and high school students on our campuses and teach them things like bystander intervention skills, teaching them how to notice when there's an issue with a friend, when a friend is in distress, identifying it as a problem, and teaching those students about where the resources are for help so that their friends can get the assistance. So it's really a package of different things that we need to do together to really change the culture. And the most important thing is that we need to address the stigma around mental health concerns. And terms such as mental illness, when our students that we see hear that word, they're less eager to seek services. So what we want to do is really not define the student by the condition, but actually talk about what the student is experiencing and helping them with that.
Thank you. Yes.
I would say that educators obviously have been thinking a lot about this, and what I've quickly realized just hearing the first 5 responses is that we have spent a great deal of time trying to codify our beliefs and understandings about safety and response through our emergency response plans and through expectations of New York State. But the thing that we haven't done is created a meaningful clearinghouse of what these social emotional interventions are. There's lots of examples in our school community. A lot of schools have brought in community health professionals into their school in order to make connections with the community and to assist in that way. There are lots of individualized programs such as mindfulness and trauma-sensitive schools. But I recognize that because we are reacting out of a genuine fear, we haven't had an opportunity to take the time and say, what are these preventatives that can help us be more supportive to stop us from getting to that particular point.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, and I think another thing that has occurred is the legislation for mental health services, in the schools, that in July of 2018, school districts will need to have a mental health curriculum. Mahaney's, the Mental Health Association, has a subcommittee, which I'm a part of, and we're working on developing best practices and really get that information out there. So from day one, when those students start kindergarten, they're going to hear that language. So we'll hope to help destigmatize, mental health, and that it is behavioral health, and it's just part of the whole health spectrum. If somebody has diabetes or has obesity, that they're getting help for it. Same way for children with mental health related issues. And I do have to concur that anxiety definitely is high prevalence in the community. And again, students need to perform in school, but they don't have the ability because they're worried about what's going on at home, what they've experienced. And if people are aware of the ACEs study, again, adverse child, experience, that the higher the ACEs score, the higher the risk is for those children to really succeed and be prepared in the school. As well as if you have a 5 or over in an ACEs score, I mean, again, you're 10 years more likely to have a shorter life of 10 years due to the complex nature of your health condition, of mental health diagnosis, of their coping skills of self-medicating through substances. So it really is a larger challenge. And when we talk about it takes a village to raise a child, it really takes a whole village or a community to be safe, and it hits all aspects of our system.
I'm going to have Chief Sears and then go right to Renee Ryder.
Thank you. I want to build a little bit on the trauma-informed conversation that we started a while back. And I believe to be truly trauma-informed, we need to break down the silos that we all kind of operate in. From the police department's perspective, we encounter children that are facing all sorts of levels of trauma every day. And it's not helpful to anyone if we don't share that information with anyone, especially in the school district. So one of the things we've done is we started a program with the school district to inform them anytime we're involved with a person from the ages of 5 to 18, and that they can kind of put some feelers out there during the school day to make sure that that person, if they're having a bad day or if they're falling asleep, that it's not treated as a disciplinary issue. It's treated as from a holistic standpoint. And I think too much, at least in some of the disciplines that we all represent, is that information is there. We just need to share it. I mean, we do a lot of case studies of some of these school shootings, and the signs are there. And, it's nobody's fault that they're getting missed, but they're getting missed. And I think that collectively, the collective we sitting up here, the collective we sitting out there can kind of come up with a better plan to attack those things from the very beginning, because the ACE scores are so indicative of future behavior. And it's something that we try to train all of our police officers on, is to recognize the signs of trauma and tell somebody. And now we're looking at building out different avenues so we can explore how we can really, truly affect and use that information effectively so that little one doesn't have the problems and turn into something bigger in the future.
Thank you. Renee Ryder.
So there's been a lot said, so as everyone talks, to build on my colleagues here at the table, I just want to talk about how you started, Dr. Wilkins, with the word mental illness, and piggyback on what my colleagues have said. Let's talk about mental health. Let's look at comprehensive services. Let's look at mental health and well-being. And then you had mentioned the mental health education bill. So the mental health education bill, as you stated, was signed into law last year, and it also requires, as you pointed out, the health education curriculum, all ages, elementary, middle school, high school, for there to be a curriculum to talk about mental health and well-being and talk about the parity between physical health and mental health. And we have an advisory council that is leading the work with Mahaney's, with Glenn Liebman and the Mental Health Association of New York State. In addition, Mental Health Association of New York State is doing some lesson plans and other curricula as well. But we pulled together, and our commissioner, Mary Ellen Elia, commissioner of the State Education Department, directed us to pull together an advisory council of health educators, mental health experts from across the state, and many other disciplines, school superintendents, et cetera, and we're helping, and it's helping guide our work, and so that we can have the resources to help schools be prepared when the bill becomes effective. It is law. When the law becomes effective July 1 of this year. So I just wanted to point out that a lot of great work, collaborative work is happening in relation to mental health. But it is important that we address stigma and that we really look at more comprehensive services in mental health and well-being as what we're trying to teach our kids, so even our students can understand the signs of themselves, of others. And I just want to point out the students. I so appreciate this forum, starting with the students, because if we are going to change schools, we got to have the student voice. And, thank you so much for your points, because as I listened to your points, they were all about proactive, change the culture, respect, and as Dr. Wilkins pointed out, trust. And so we will change the way schools work if we really focus on the culture and the climate, and we, the department, are working on ways to promote school climate as well, and not necessarily only focus on school violence. So, it's a combination, but the way we change the culture is going to be key in this work.
Thank you. Stephen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I would like to add a comment about the stigma issue, because I think it's crucial for us in our effort to address and minimize stigma, not to increase it unintentionally. The facts of the matter are that violence is a very low probability event. It's very hard to predict, and it is not a characteristic of mental illness per se. And I think in our efforts to try to identify people who are potentially dangerous and for whom we've missed red flags, I think we have to remember they are us. We're all, Kevin Love, the basketball player you may have seen, just put out a paper, everyone's struggling with something. As soon as we kind of embrace that attitude, and our students are no different than the rest of us, it's not can we find the sick person, it's can we respond and care for our colleagues, our family members, our students who are struggling with something. So I just want to highlight the fact that the mentally ill are more likely to be the violent, to be the victims of violence than the perpetrators of violence. So we're back to how do you predict a very low probability event? And we talked about the public health model. It seems to me that if you took universal precautions and assumed everyone is struggling with something, not can we find the sick amongst the rest of us, then we might have more compassion and more likelihood of creating an environment in which someone might say, hey, I'd like to talk to you.
And those models are going on in schools now. There's multi-tier system support, and in terms of behavioral health as well, emotional behavioral health. And so you have this tier 1 universal kind of screening, as you were talking about, in terms of really trying to get a sense of who these kids are and also where we are as a whole school. But it's also thinking about all the pressures that schools are under as is from the state and also from the federal government. And that puts strain on the teachers, but also puts strains on the kids after that. So when we start looking at this broader model, we have to consider both the children as well as the staff throughout all that. But that universal precaution system is being put into place into schools. But in the same terms, in terms of the mental health law, I don't know how many teachers are going, yay, there's another thing kind of coming our way. That's frustrating, right? We're talking about mental health care for our kids. And I could just sense that educators are like, oh God, there's another mandate on us. Rather than this is what we need to do for our community, for our kids, and for our adults.
Can I just make a point about that? I invite you to come to the advisory council made up of a lot of health educators, teachers, and mental health experts who are thrilled to be helping. The energy in the room is one of the, I run a lot of advisory councils and task forces, and I can tell you the energy in this room, trying to make it right on how we improve mental health, the health education curriculum to really address the mental health and well-being of our youth. There's more energy in that room than I've seen in many. So I guess I just have to counter, with that.
And I think another thing is, Mahaney's, and I don't want to be an advertisement for Mahaney's, but they're a great resource. They also have youth mental health first aid. So that is something as well that could be an opportunity for teachers, administrators, and even students. And it really helps to identify when is this behavior of a higher concern, really looking at the symptomology as well as warning signs. And then the resources. There are many resources out there that school personnel or students can access. And it's also then educating the child to then know that another student is struggling and then bring it forward and bring it to a teacher, a guidance counselor, social worker.
Yeah, I hope I can just give a quick student's perspective on this. I just wanted to say that, in the midst of being in high school, I think that a lot of kids have anxiety, stress, any other mental issues, but they don't have the bravery or the the guts to go and say that they need that kind of help. For example, like if somebody, wanted to see the guidance counselor or whatever because they were having trouble with something at home, their friends would be like, oh, where were you at lunch today? And they don't want to tell their friends, oh, I'm having trouble with something, so I need to see the counselor. And that's always been an issue. In a crowd of high school students, going to get help is not exactly the most popular thing. And I think that we should have availability of resources, but we also need to make it clear that it's okay to use those resources, because it's not, it's done quietly, or kids don't do it at all. They keep it, like I said before, like they keep it inside because they don't want to reach out, because it's not, accepted as wanting to reach out. And the second thing I just wanted to say is that when things like this happen at schools, like for example, if a school had like a bomb threat, or things like that happen at schools, after you take action, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cough. After you take action at those schools, like you suspend the kid or whatever it is, disciplinary action, afterwards ask them, why did you write that bomb threat? Why did you feel the need to say, I'm going to bomb this school and tape it on the bathroom? Like, there was something behind that. There was something at home. There was something at school that influenced you to do that. And I think we don't have that second step. After we suspend the kid for 3 days, they come back, they don't have anything to support them. And I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay, out of the mouth of babes. Out of the mouth of babes. Thank you for that. I want to also keep going a little bit, because we have a lot of school professionals that are in here in the audience, and I want to get onto the topic about how does a school prepare for such an event as an active shooter or building intruder? So it's multifaceted. So who's someone from the panel? Again, I have a bunch of security people in this audience. I also have some superintendents in the audience. Anyone of you want to jump in again? How do we prepare for such activity and events? Yes.
I'll just talk from a colony perspective. We've actually had a really good relationship with both our major school districts. I think preparing for it, we have been part of both school district safety committees for roughly about 19 years. And I think you have to sit together with law enforcement and make them working together with your plans, your strategies on what you're going to do in case an event like this happens. But also take it to the next level and make sure that you're training in your drills and the procedures that need to be done in case you have an active shooter. And I always use the example, and I think the state standard is 8 fire drills for a year.
Right, 8 evacuations.
And I think we only need to do 4 lockdown drills a year. And I always use this example. I don't know the last time somebody died in a school fire in probably 150 years. And I think that when you start doing like the lockdown drills and the training, you just don't say we're going to do a lockdown drill and check the box. You continue to do the lockdown drills, but you do it at different times of the day, not when just everybody's in class. Do it at lunchtime when the library's full, at dismissal, times when there's going to be a lot of people out and about, and how is the school with law enforcement going to react to this?
I have to say, as you mentioned, we work very closely with the Colony Police Department, and as someone who works with small children, we have to be very thoughtful about how we run these drills. And certainly, when we go into a lockdown, our kids are familiar with that now. Our focus is not just on being quiet in the room, but watching the adults, because ultimately, you want to get out if you can. And if the children are quiet and watching the adults and getting their signals from them, moving through the room during that lockdown drill, getting comfortable with that concept that you might not just stay in the corner, because your muscle memory, if there ever is, God forbid, an active situation, will just have you stay frozen in the corner. So we try to practice those things. We talk to the kids in realistic terms, not necessarily saying active shooter, but talking to them about the fact that if there was something going on and we couldn't use the door, how else could we get out of the classroom? And most children don't think about going out the window because we spend all of our time telling them to listen to the adults and not go out the So these are the things that, but again, us telling them is just one step. They're little, but they're very smart and they're very intuitive. And if we involve them in a conversation, in an honest and open conversation about how they can stay safe and how they can help keep their peers safe, I agree with the high school students that are here with us today. They're right on. They will solve this problem. They will be the ones to care for future generations and make our jobs easier, because that's what they do each day. If we take our cues from them and we provide them what they need, which is support in how to deal with the many stressors that they have, but more importantly, recognizing that if suspending people was going to solve the problem, we would have solved this. That's really not the solution, and we need to take a step back and look at what that really truly is, and I think these conversations are a great starting point.
Anybody from the audience want to tackle this about what you're doing for your plans and for active shooter and intruders? Don't be shy. Yes. Okay. South Colony.
I'm John Buehler, Superintendent from South Colony.
He's coming.
Hi, good morning. I'm John Buehler, Superintendent from South Colony. Just to add, I think plans adjust and change according to the conditions that you face every year. And we're fortunate. We've shared great information, and we have advice that comes out of our communication with first responders, Colony Police Department. And I think that information sharing and relationship is critical, because you can have plans in place and your plans are going to have to adjust according to the conditions that we face every year. And the other part that I wanted to kind of point out, and I heard it on the panel, I want to emphasize it, I think that it's really important to get the services in the schools for mental health where the kids are, because some of our families struggle outside of school to just function from day to day, and it's hard to receive the support they need. So clinical mental health services, I know we're working on that. We're expanding extra social workers, psychologists. All of those things are very important in this bigger plan of school safety, because the information and the proactive steps you take early hopefully prevent the terrible situation where you've got a young person or an adult who is taking actions that we've seen on the news. So just wanted to point that out, but talk about the information sharing. I think is so important. But thanks.
Thank you. We have another one. We have 2 more.
My name is Eric Stern.
Go get your mic.
My name is Eric Stern. I'm a professor at the College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity here at UAlbany. And I have a question for the panel and the audience, for that matter. We have a unique group here with a lot of expertise. To what extent does the preparedness that's going on extend to the period after a violent event and a tactical response? The reason that I'm asking is that as we've watched the aftermath of Parkland, we see that there are a lot of decisions and a lot of other things that have to happen in terms of psychosocial support to teachers, students, families, community members, rituals of mourning, and I think a well-prepared school district, well-prepared community learns from the good examples and the mistakes when it comes to those things as well. My sense in the academic community is that's an area where there is less research. In fact, one of the really hot and interesting areas in emergency preparedness in general is to look more closely at the recovery process with regard to all kinds of events. Is there more to be done in that part of preparedness? Thank you.
Yes, we have some responses on the panel. Thank you.
Yes, and when unfortunately we've had suicides in Albany County, and when students do complete suicide, we reach out and offer assistance. We can have immediate that same day response by using our mobile crisis team or our child and adolescent mobile team, as well as then we deploy our clinical staff from our outpatient services. And they are there to assist not only the students, we usually go to a library, a quiet area, but are also there for staff members and, in addition, community members that may be impacted. So we do provide that, and also we have provided then ongoing support because it's just not one day and done. we need to provide ongoing support because other things may trigger it, especially teachers. And I think we need to do more for our teachers because, as Andrew indicated, they have a stressful job. There's a lot of requirements for them.
Right.
So we continue to do that.
Yeah, if I could just add, since 2001, 9/11, the Department of Mental Health has been training emergency disaster mental health workers. We have been involved over the years in responses to the hurricanes and the flooding locally. Some people are deployed to other places in the country through the Red Cross. But I think the danger is complacency. Thank God we haven't had any tragedies of that magnitude locally that we needed to deploy these folks, and to keep them always at their best is hard, so we try to keep the training. I think just saying this out loud today will probably notify a lot of people in the room that they don't even know we did that. But we have, we recognize that the community needs to have a recovery plan as well, and we have people who are trained in mass casualty events and family support and all kinds of stuff like that, so.
If I could add from the college perspective, we have been working a lot in the area of suicide prevention, and in that space there's a term called postvention. And essentially what that does is it creates a protocol for responding to crisis situation, but proactively. So with a postvention protocol, we tie it with our crisis intervention protocol. We have a team of people from a variety of stakeholder groups on campus that meet together regularly, that look at students of concern, that try and get help for them, and that kind of thing. And God forbid that after an incident, that team gets together and works with the survivors, works with the mourning, works with the families. We deal with memorial services and that kind of thing. So postvention is actually conceptualized as a feedback loop, and postvention then actually works to prevent future concerns and future tragedies in some ways.
Renee, then Andrew.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, in schools, when you look at the regulations and the requirements for the emergency response plans and the district school safety plans, in that same section, postvention is one of the pieces that is supposed to be with everyone's school plan. So if that hasn't been a focus, and it may be in schools, I just want to point that out, as there is a provision in regulation that should be postvention, should be a piece of the emergency response plan.
Andrew, before you go, just as a reminder to everybody, that every single school in the state of New York has to do a plan. I'm not sure if everybody in here knows that, and that plan goes right to Renee Ryder's department. So plans are actually made by every single district in detail. So I just want to add that note. Andrew.
And just on that, it's just a lot of these things that we call plans. I'm just talking about the realities of schools and whatnot, that we have these plans, but how often is it really discussed?
Right.
How often do we have these frank discussions with the students, with the teachers, with the families in the community? Because any crisis that goes on afterwards is going to be a long-term just continuum of care. That 5 years after a crisis, things still may be percolating after that crisis. And that's schools and working with resource officers, working with everybody. I know a lot of people in this panel in some way, but how do we kind of get that message back out to folks that we need this long-term care, that sometimes schools will just look at outside resources, spend lots of money there, rather than looking at a lot of the internal resources that we have
They're
already.
already there, absolutely.
Well, for survivors of events, it's a lifetime recovery.
Yes. Absolutely, post-traumatic. We're going to do Sheriff Apple, and then we have our audience question.
Just to touch on your question quick, on the tactical end as well, after the end of last year, we did a large lockdown active shooter drill in Boresville, very large. We had 3 different agencies. We had kids as role players with makeup. Some parents criticized because they thought we traumatized their kids. But we were like, you know what, unfortunately, this has become the new norm. Whether you like to say that or not, this is the new norm. So we wanted it to be as realistic as possible and experience all the adrenaline, experience every emotion as possible. And then after that, there is a series of critiques and debriefings and breakdowns. We met with kids, what did you think? What did you think we could have done better? What do you think you could have done better? And we had mental health professionals involved in it. It was a very large drill. although it's probably not practical to do that constantly, but that realization of it is what you really need to experience with a drill of that nature. And it taught us a lot. We had a lot of failures in there. It taught us an awful lot. We were like, wow, we thought we could have done better here. Probably tactically we couldn't have. We had some people come in without even without their hand on their gun. I mean, just some very simple things because the emotions and the adrenaline are flying. And with that, I also want to follow up with, we're kind of forgetting, and I don't know if anybody wants to bring it up on the panel, and I appreciate everybody on the panel coming, and thank you, County Executive, for putting this together, but we're forgetting the elephant in the room is the funding. All right? Schools are getting cut constantly. Counties are getting cut constantly. Towns are getting cut constantly. Schools are expected to do more, and then if if a child fails, and then unfortunately if they can't, catch that child and he falls through that void, we end up with them in our system. And once you're in our system, it's very hard to get out of our system. So, we need to also get back to the reality of, we've cut mental health funding for years and years and years at every level of government. And we need to get back and start to look at that, because almost everything that involves law enforcement, almost every issue in school, there's always a little bit of a mental health component in the back that nobody wants to talk about. And again, if that's not addressed, eventually we end up with them in our system, and it's very hard to get out. And then that starts the cycle. And then the next brother or sister sees that, well, it wasn't all that bad for him, and then the cycle continues. So the mental health, to me, is the sheriff in the county is one of the major components. And we work hard with the county, Dr. Giordano, to get his people in there constantly to talk to the inmates, because if we can solve the issues in the jail, chances of them coming back are few and far between. And it's the same in the schools. It's no different in the jail than it is in the schools. You still got to work on those fundamental core values and have parents become parents again and not think the schools are going to solve all the problems in the world. And that's what we see constantly in the schools that we deal with.
We have an audience. Next question.
So you hear me? The sheriff actually just took a lot of steam out of my comment. So kudos to you. But I wanted to go back to one of the comments that the doctor just made, that every school district in the state has to have a plan. Well, almost every commercial company has to have a security plan, and they do, and it's a checkbox. So to have that plan in place is great. I just happened to pull this comment out the other day from George Bernard Shaw. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place. And I mentioned
Powerful. That's powerful. Say it one more time. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Say it one more time. It was good. It was really good.
The idea behind of it is the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. That's the message, right? So the idea here is a lot of what we've been talking about today is around mental health, and I think everybody's spot on, because we really got to get away from the idea that we're labeling and identifying folks, because then we're going to have kids that don't want to be identified, and that's the exact opposite we want to create. But this entire thing is a pendulum, and we got to understand it's not only the mental health. We actually have a committee here today from Voorheesville. There's 5 of us. We started a community outside of the school. We started a community meeting, a society or forum, if you will. But the idea is we want everybody to come in and talk about what their concerns are. 90% of it was, I don't know how to communicate with my own child. So you may have a plan in place at school, but I don't know how to talk to them about it. And they practice it maybe 4 times a year, but I don't know how to physically talk to my own child about it without making them nervous, right? The other percent was, what is the school doing from metal detectors, cameras, doors, etc. The entire thing here we need to understand is, it kind of falls in with like cybersecurity. We can't just worry about heavy on the mental health or heavy on the technology. It's across the entire pendulum. We got to look at all pieces, the people, process, and procedures of the entire plan, because it's only 30. I keep reiterating it to these guys. It's only 30% of the technology piece. The rest of it is a human component of this. And if we focus on those, we're not going to always stop it, because, like I said, it was said before, it's so unpredictable. We want to be able to react to it in a much better fashion. That's the goal that we have to get to. The first goal, then the second goal is to kind of, drown it out. But that's just my theory to your comment earlier. Thank you.
Brian.
It's interesting, going back a little ways, the comments of Jill and Asma, they and you just identified, we as adults, we as parents sometimes feel helpless because we don't know the strategies to use to have a conversation, exactly the logistics of safety plans and how to inform our children. But the big question socially is what's the difference between what happened in Sandy Hook and what happened in Parkland? And unquestionably, it's the student voice. And what we've discovered very quickly by asking our students, we know of all the nationwide movements for students to speak out. It's forced us as grown-ups to listen to our children differently. Jill told a great story of the elementary kids being engaged in the process of learning about safety and why you do it. I think, on whole, we've missed out on that component. We practice robotically the things we need to do by mandate, but we haven't held strong conversations about what is the impact on them socially and emotionally. You've got to be not only muscle memory, you've got to be fluid and be able to adapt and go out a window when you need to go out a window. And failing to have the conversations about why we're doing these drills, why it's important, being rational. This is the real world right now, and we hope it never happens, but it may. We haven't had honest conversations and listened for the feedback from our kids, and this has the potential to be a great turning point for us. And the second thing, obviously, is these community forums for our parents and families so they can have voice. There's no answer to security. There isn't an answer. It's not ballistic doors and glass. It's not metal detectors. There is no singular answer. But the adults in our communities need to be able to come together and have voice. And I think you'll see in many districts, such as Burn Hills, they invited families in to have those conversations and to challenge the status quo. And even though they may not leave completely comfortable, they've left knowing more than they did before. Our safety plans, which are required to be filed, there's a lot of redaction in that because obviously we don't want the intricacies of a plan to be shared with the public and fear that they'd be used against us. So in some ways, putting out redacted district-wide emergency response plans doesn't create a level of comfort, it creates a level of mystery. So I think having candid conversations and following up with kids about why things have happened, what was the result of that, because those conversations about bomb threat may very well have happened, but what we've discovered in our school, our kids have no idea what happened during and after an event, and that's a mistake.
Andrew.
Just within all this, just a brief comment that all those plans and all these different conversations have to deal with different cultural and linguistic issues as well. That how are you possibly addressing any of this without addressing the cultural language issues that's going on in your district? And it's great that we open up our doors, but who are the families that come or the families that want to come? We have to be able to go out, to be able to reach out to these people. And how do we start to gather that? I think that's a missing piece throughout all this all the time.
I also want to add something that we've been thinking about a lot as students transition to college, and that is the question of how do we align the promotion of well-being that is so important for students, and the fact that most of our students are healthy and are resilient, and in terms of building the resilience in all students, and also then providing at the same time the necessary training that needs to happen around active shooter situations and other potential crises. We've been tasked at the university to build an online orientation program for students, and it requires some things legally, including active shooter training. So we're essentially starting our training with a mindfulness exercise, asking students to imagine themselves graduating from college and being successful, and then Part 2 that they'll go into, Module 2, is the active shooter training. Okay, you can certainly imagine yourself successful if you can get through and be alive through college. So how do we make, and I'm asking all of us because I don't know the answer, how do we align those two things? Because that's very, very important. How we present all this to our students can, in fact, be a very, very important intervention to build resilience and provide them with these skills.
I just want to make a comment also. We had active shooters outside the school setting. If we remember Las Vegas, We've had movie theaters. So I think we want to also think about the adults and what we're doing in our community in everyday life. So, it's not just the school, but I'm going to throw some fire on here a little bit. So I'm going to ask a question. Ready? Are there SROs in all schools? How are they assigned? Do we need to have SROs? They are school resource officers. So I throw it out there. Do we need to have armed police in our buildings? Audience, panelists, ooh, okay. North Colony, Joe. He's right here.
So I'm going to give a little bit of the wind up here. So I want to thank County Executive McCoy for assembling everybody here. And I think the really good news is the right people are here at the table. And by that I mean, okay, I can look at two people in particular on this panel. I can look at Maura Manning. I can look at Deputy Chief Mike Woods, who I just had a conversation with in the last 24 hours. Maura, who we've met together on mental health issues. So again, reinforcing what you said previously, John, the right people are here at the table. We have established these links. And the most important thing that should come from a town hall such as this is that we get better. Okay? We look at continuous improvement. How do we get better? And that we realize that this issue is complex and multifaceted. Okay? So that there is a mental health component, that there is a safety and security component, that all of those are key to solving the problem. And so, you know, what really will have to happen is we're not going to solve problems here today, but we're going to start to solve them. And we're going to know, you know, what the nature of those problems are and who the resources are in our community to bring them to the fore here to really, really make a difference. Ozma, I'm so grateful for your advocacy, okay? And I think that, you know, I really want to reiterate what Brian said previously here is that, you know, the future is in our students, okay? They are on the cusp of becoming politically active, and they will truly make a difference, okay? And they have made us woke to this particular problem here. So I think, again, I want to commend all of them as we go forward here. But going back to SROs, the fact of the matter is that North County does not have an SRO at this point. Okay, but in terms of that long windup and having the right people at the table, okay, we are seriously considering bringing in an SRO program. And I know that we have a meeting on that to discuss that, and you know, we are going to be looking very seriously at that. And I think in terms of answering your question, Kim, the response to that is it is a community effort, okay? And it does involve law enforcement. It does involve social service agencies connected with mental health. It involves collaboration with the New York State Education Department. So in response to that, I would say that a strong relationship with your local police department is extremely important, okay? And it's not just about law enforcement. It is about a community holistic approach to addressing a problem. And if an SRO is the vehicle for that good action to happen, then so be it. Thank you.
Yes, we have a gentleman over here, and we have another Albany Superintendent Adams.
Sorry, I'm not a microphone hog, I'm just very passionate about this. When it comes to that conversation, it's going back to what the sheriff said. Having an officer in the school district, it sounds great in an ideal state, right? But what you have to take in not only the district, but each building into consideration. Where Voorheesville, we sit into a valley. Another school district might sit up on a hill. To me, my concern is not necessarily inside the school. I have a bigger concern outside the school. There's a street that's about 40 feet above our playground. The school buses also interact with the parents coming in and out. That officer, who sounds great, going back to what the sheriff said, has a cost associated with it, could potentially be on the other side of the school dealing with another action. And so then we're all relying on that one plan, and it's not effective to what actually happens on the other side of campus. So that's why I hate to say, let's not blanket a statement for all school districts, because there is no rubber stamp. And it's not even going to be down to a district. South Colony and North Colony are represented here today, and they have large districts, numerous elementaries, all with different footprints, all with different landscapes. And that all has to be taken into consideration when you formulate a plan, is my opinion.
We have Superintendent Adams. Let me just give you the definition of a resource officer. It's supposed to be to resource to engage and enhance the education program. The expectation is for an SRO to be a resource for students, teachers, administrators, and parents.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkins, and County Executive McCoy, thank you for having us here. Kawita Adams, City School District of Albany. I think one of the most important things that we talk about here is about building that relationships, building those positive relationships, and thank you for that definition, because that's what I was going to try and share and bring us back to what is the true purpose of a school resource officer. And when we look at that true purpose, how does that fit into our school districts and into our various schools? Right now, we in Albany have 3 middle schools, and we have 2 middle schools that have school resource officers. And the discussion among our board members is, do we need that third SRO, school resource officer, at the 3rd middle school? And that is a large discussion. And in light of everything that's happened in Parkland, Florida, and across our nation, we're still looking at what are the concerns that are being brought to the table. And so with Chief Sears, we've been working very closely with clearly defining, and I think that's what I would like to say about the school resource officer for school districts, which would be very important, clearly defining those roles and responsibilities of what law enforcement's place is or is not at the school. And so, not that I have an answer, but just part of the process is making sure that as districts, number one, we have strong relationships with law enforcement in that we clearly understand what we can and cannot do, but then what is the role of that SRO on campuses where we have them, and then in contemplating whether to expand that role, what will be the role? And then looking at the training of those SROs on the campus to make sure that we're staying true to that purpose, if indeed we are choosing to continue that in our respective districts. But the key is the relationship that those officers are having with our students and with our community and serving as that liaison. So thank you.
Patrick, you got your voice and go right now.
I just want to add a quick comment. When I started school a couple years back in 7th grade at the high school, we did have a school resource officer, and it was good to see that he was out and about and helping out. So there is positive and negative, but and now as a senior, we don't have one. But the Waterloo Police Department is, we were just talking about it last night at the board meeting actually, that they're involved and they're coming around to visit the school. We have one officer in particular that's coming, and he's walking around the halls doing his routine. He's going out and he's meeting people, he's talking to the kids, and I think that just showing his face and having the police there is making a difference, but not necessarily having a school resource officer is needed.
I just wanted to touch on the SRO, some topics. I agree 100% with what you were saying about the SRO. A lot of times you hear the SRO and they describe it as an armed police officer. And the SRO is so much more than an armed police officer in your school. And Mr. Buhner, Mr. Cacciadorian will attest to it. South Colony, we've had an SRO in there for approximately 18, 19 years. And the benefits are unbelievable, not only to the school district, to the police department. The SRO is a counselor, is a teacher, goes to all the events. They don't look at him as a cop that's armed and at school. He works with the PTA and all the other committees within the school district, and it's really extremely beneficial. And that being said, he is an armed police officer in school for that worst case scenario. And I'm not really a big numbers guy, but most active shooters in school, 70% of them are over in 5 minutes. 10% of them are over in 2 minutes. Average response time for law enforcement on active shooter calls is about 6.5 minutes. So on the worst case scenario, you have an officer right there at your disposal. Most of our high schools also, the two major high schools, we average about 200 calls for service at the high schools. And then to take it to the next step, as we've been saying along the panel, so many issues that students have happen outside the school. In Colony, if there's an issue with a child or child's family or would affect the child outside of school, all those reports are given to the SRO. He has all that information. That is information that now the school district has, the high school has, that they normally would not have when that child shows up at school the next day. So the benefits are unbelievable. And getting to your point, with the SRO at every school, Town of Colony has 30 schools, private and parochial. It's almost impossible to put a school resource officer in every solitary school. That being said, a lot of our elementary schools are a little bit more confined. We have a buzzer system, only one way in. So we've made some plans to actually help the security on that end of it, minus having an SRO in the school.
Just to add to that, some of the other advantages, it's not just behavior management and working with our kids. There might be a situation in a park over a weekend between kids, and we want to know about that before Monday morning so that we're ready to address it, make sure it doesn't get worse. We had a scenario a couple of weeks ago with a domestic situation that we wanted to be aware of. We had an extra presence at that building for the day. And unfortunately, over the weekend, that person had some additional issues. But those are all very important things for us to know, to be ahead of things. The only other thing I wanted to mention, I think the SROs are critical, but remember the old commercials, and I'm a very thoughtful, conservative, efficient person, right? We're in charge of community resources and making sure we use those to the best of our ability. But kind of pay me now or pay me later, going back to Sheriff Apple's comment, there are other pieces here that are critical for schools, and I'll say it because I've been doing this a while. Having great alternative programs. You have to account for every kid. 99% of our kids go through our system and do well, but not everybody. So you have to have alternative programs, you have to have mental health services, you have to have social workers. You have to make sure every kid that goes through your system feels like they can succeed and graduate from high school, and nobody leaves feeling hopeless. That's one of the variables we can control. It costs some money, though, to run those programs the right way, to put those pieces in place. I think that's one variable, and certainly the infrastructure piece, and then I think communication with first responders, the police department, just information sharing. It's a combination of all of those things, and it is complex. And I think thinking about other small districts where I've worked prior to my job now, my position now, everybody has to figure out how to control and improve those variables within the situation that they have. They may not have the same number of resources. Their schools may look different in regard to the physical plan. But I think it's identifying those variables we can control and improving all of them to the best of our ability to be proactive for our kids. So.
Thank you, John. And one thing I want to just reiterate, John said, own every child. That is really the heartbeat of this. Own every single child that comes through the system in that building. It is so important. Thank you. Chief Sears.
Thank you. Yeah, so I wanted to just echo Superintendent's comments a little bit. Thank you. What we're trying to do is build a framework around our SRO program. We, in the Albany Police Department, in the school district, we have a great relationship. We have a very long-standing SRO program. We have 3 SROs that have been there, well, at least 2 of them that have been there, I think, even before I've been an officer. So.
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years. And the information and everything that we share and we get out of there it's invaluable. It really is. And what we don't need to do is we don't need to make one big plan for the whole district. I think each building has to have its own separate needs. which we can, kind of build out from the framework that we're developing. And when the school district did, they just had another, a middle school, and we definitely see the benefit of not having an SRO at that school. So we're trying to work on different ways of getting an SRO in that school, but what we have done is, at least through our community engagement unit, our neighborhood engagement unit, we've developed point persons for each school, an officer. So the principals and the staff, they have that go-to person that they can go to for the minor things. Because what the SRO program isn't, to me, is I don't think of it as, it is definitely a deterrent to an active shooter situation, but that's not going to be our response. I mean, that's going to be such a small fraction of what our written and protocols are for an active shooter situation. And SRO is not taking cell phones from kids. We're not telling kids to take their hats off. That's not our role. Our role in the school is to be a conduit of our community policing philosophy, because we have a captive audience of children that we're not going to get anywhere else. And the school district's not going to be able to replicate that outside of the school environment. So it's really an opportunity for the officer to build those relationships so that in a time of crisis, everybody knows each other's face. And those split seconds are what really matters.
Absolutely. Andrew.
It's a weird topic, just about SROs and what we need. I'm pro SRO in so many ways, but then also knowing that the more weapons we have in school, more armed people we have in school, the more arrests that we have in school, especially for cultural minorities. There is a higher rate of arrests in regards to that in our schools. We have police officers in there. We also know that we have families that are scared about being deported right now and don't want to be near a police officer. We also know there are different cultural issues in regards to the police and how they are integrating with their police officers within the community. So those issues have to come into play. That right now, a lot of schools don't have full-time nurses, for Pete's sake, and we want to get armed security in there. Where is that? If we talk about health, and we talk about mental health, we talk about physical health, and yet we don't have nurses in our school. And then the final part that we just haven't talked about is just the gun deaths that are going on in this country. And what are we looking at in terms of guns? That we know that there's close to 2 million children and adolescents that have access to home loaded, unlocked guns. 2 million. That's a bigger issue. How are we addressing this? How do we start to think about that? But that we do have to do things that we have to manage, but I do get concerned that we do see an increased rate of arrests, increased rate of disciplinary issues when you have armed officers within the schools. And that, you can look at The Economist, you can look at different things, different studies that have come out repeatedly about that. So it's a difficult balance. And I respect the SROs. I love the SROs that I work with in the schools. But to the superintendent that said that you're going to look at an SRO plan, my question is, within that conversation, will your school psychologists, will your social workers, will your school counselors be in that conversation before you move on that SRO? That how many superintendents have met with all the mental health people within their schools to find out what's going on around that school? It doesn't often happen, in my experience. So we can talk all these things, but here are real concrete things that we can do and can address without any more money, without any more resources. We have it in the schools, how can we better address it?
I will say just on the SRO, part of the SRO program, like the chief was saying, is that fostering that relationship between law enforcement and students.
Right.
I think our SRO, I think he almost doesn't arrest anybody. I mean, very few arrests in the high school. Again, now I'm just speaking for Colony.
That's right, right.
Same for Albany.
Yeah.
We have very, very few arrests in the school.
Absolutely.
Very few.
And I dig that. I'm just saying that on the whole, that's what typically happens. That's why, and again, in my experience, the SROs have been a valuable resource to me. But also, I just know in terms of, in a larger sense, that's what's been going on.
And I will just say, as far as I understand that more weapons in the school, I do understand that argument. But I will say this: I am not for arming teachers. I am not for hiring private security companies. But I am for having a law enforcement officer in uniform that gets trained every year in active shooter response, and he's doing firearms training and knows how to respond and react if worst case scenario happens. And that's the difference between having a uniformed, armed police officer in there who's trained, opposed to just giving people guns in the schools. So,
just to be clear, my position is not one or the other. You need both plus. Schools have been asked to take on more and more of society's needs in the last 10, 15 years. We can do it, but the resources have to be there. So in our situation, we've got great people, great communication with the police department. We track suspensions and behavior management very carefully. I run all my own hearings for the district. We know exactly what's going on as far as their mental health needs for our kids, everything else. But I think it's a great resource to have. It's been well run in county. We're fortunate. But I just want to be clear. My position is, in a fairly tight budget year this year, we're adding clinical mental health services. We're adding another psychologist. We clearly understand it is a combination of things that have to be in place.
There has to be a balance between the psychosocial safety of the kids as well as the physical safety of the kids.
We have one in the front, we have Jack, and then go back over to Joe.
Hi, everyone. Sorry. One of the things that you had mentioned was, I'm sorry, as a parent, I do think that SROs are invaluable. I think that the comment about having all these guns, unlocked guns, I grew up as a child with a 22 behind the door just in case the groundhog came out and, my father always, I lived in the country, so my father always had guns out. My point is we have to teach safety. This is part of our community. So if we can bring in resource officers into the schools to have kids not be scared of guns, number one, and number two, have them be comfortable saying, that's a gun, I'm not gonna touch it, my parents will kill me. So I'm just saying there's, and I'm not accurately. But my point is I think we have this, everybody's so scared of guns. Guns aren't bad. They're not, I'm not an NRA member, I'm just saying that now. But I don't want people to think that if we don't present guns to parents and say, look, these are the different guns that are out there, feel comfortable looking at it because you know what, unfortunately, they'd be faced with one. So as a parent, I don't think it's a bad thing.
Sorry. I'll do a quick response and then I'm sure other panelists will respond. That I don't mind for going into this minefield in some respects. Just that we know that with the more guns, there's going to be more violence and more gun violence. Ultimately, I'm not saying about any specific one piece of data about that. In your home, that you were raised with guns, I'm not anti-gun, the same thing. But that when we know that when we have a proliferation of guns in those communities, there's a proliferation of gun violence.
I guess I meant with officers. That's what I meant with officers.
Yes,
is that
yes, but also in terms of the schools, in terms of when we have lots of research, and I understand what's going on in Albany and other places, and again, I worked with SROs before, and they're awesome. But that we also know that just on the national level, that we start to see more arrests, we start to see more negative disciplinary issues that go on in schools when you have these armed officers within the school.
But are arrests bad? I mean, is there doing
yes,
something
because
bad?
what happens, I apologize.
No, this is what this is supposed to be about, an honest
What happens is
conversation.
that small issues become bigger issues that didn't necessarily have to become bigger issues. For example, that would be just one little event where these African American girls were playing loud in a ball pit or something like that, and it just escalated like nobody's business. That there were clearly some racial overtones there, that things exploded out of nowhere, that it just went way too far, and that you see children in handcuffs because they got the police officer, and the police officer put that child in handcuffs. That these small incidents that teachers aren't sure how to deal with, sometimes they give it off to the police officer, and or that principal starts to give it off to the police officer, and things start to explode. So any way to kind of tamp things down, all the better. I'm not saying that happens all the time. It's just, and you can have these one little pieces of data that seem to work. But when you look at a larger level, it is disconcerting, to say the least, of what goes on in schools when you don't have appropriate disciplinary procedures, policies in place. Especially when you start thinking about suspensions. How are we looking at that? In-school suspension, out-of-school suspension. We have so many different things that we can do better than that. I know a lot of superintendents are trying to do better around that. So it's just...
Andrew, you just throwing all kind of fire up in here.
I
Okay. Jack, no, because I'm
sorry.
It's okay, I love you anyway. So, I'm going to go to Jack and then go right back to Joe, and then we have our gentleman.
Thank you. My name is Jack Rogan. I'm the Director of Security for the Albany City School District. I have a few perspectives on this. I'm a 23-year veteran of the Albany Police Department, and I'm 8 years now into the Director of Security as the Assistant Director. I couldn't disagree with you more.
Sweet. It's like Thanksgiving all over.
I will tell you that when we get to the table with the Albany Police Department and the superintendent, and I have the utmost respect for Dr. Wilkins because she was my former boss and my new boss now sitting here. There's no more conversations that we have with Chief Sears, Lieutenant Gerasi, and everybody else, Sheriff Apple, that are more positive. And our kids are positive, they see positive role models in a resource officer. Our arrests in the city of Albany with the police department are way down. When I started 8 years ago, it was skyrocketing. Just for the mere fact of the way the culture was and everything that happens. Everything that happens in the city of Albany, in Arbor Hill, we see that Monday morning. I have 123 monitors that work in 18 schools. The training that they get from the Albany Police Department and the resource officers on a daily basis, because we have metal detectors in the majority of our schools, which right now we are seeing an explosion of young individuals coming from Arbor Hill or anywhere in the city of Albany that believe that carrying a weapon is what they need to do. We try to school them on that, and our resource officers are a gigantic part of it. I'm with you on that, and I know you're from Voorheesville, but I grew up in the city of Albany. I grew up in Scotland Avenue. Being a detective with the Albany Police Department, the resources that we get and the information that we give to the Albany Police Department, they give to us on a daily basis, is second to none. Seeing a smiling police officer in the high school has stopped a lot of stuff for us. So I guess my second part of this whole thing is I'm hearing about all these services. I'm hearing about everything that's going on. The problem that I see, and we struggle with getting 12 drills in because of all the testing that teachers have to do. All right, you're right. Whoever said that, we don't do drills during lunchtime. We don't do drills when, we send kids out to the track and for PE outside. What do we do out there? We have partnered with the Albany Police Department to actually do in every school. We train our faculty in active shooter. They come in. We just had one the other day. 75 teachers came to this drill, and it's an emotional, and we've been doing it now for 3 years. It's fantastic. And I recommend it for anybody. We are trying, with the approval from the superintendent and the board, to get this in every school. We're having a community forum coming up in March at the high school to show parents what we do on a daily basis and how we train. It's going to be a tough conversation. And I'll tell you, if you sit through it, you'll cry, because I did. All right? I've been there. We are adding school psychologists. We are adding behavior specialists. But the funding part, and I get that, I'm always asking the superintendent, and Dr. Wilkins can tell you, I'll take 300 monitors in the school. Because I tell my guys in the morning, you're the first person they see, you're the last person they see. You're going to be able to tell me who's going to have a tough day in school. And if they're a tough day, we can send that to the police department. If there is some type of issue at night, we contact Anthony Gerasi, our lieutenant, who's on 24-hour call for us. And it's great. And believe me, it's great. Because I get those calls at 3 in the morning if our kids are involved in something. The next morning, we get a call from the Albany Police Department, and we do watch out for that student during the day. Whether it's a domestic incident home, whether it was just a stop by the police on the street for whatever reason, wrong place, wrong time. But our kids are in trouble. Let's be honest. These kids nowadays are in trouble. City of Albany, we're struggling with a lot of stuff. The police don't have enough people. The district doesn't have enough people. The funding part is gigantic for us. Mental health services, you guys are cutting everything. We make a call and we can't get you because you're somewhere else or because the funding's not there. So all I'm asking you is to open your mind to a resource officer. I'm not saying that you're absolutely wrong or anything like that. What I'm saying is the invaluable part of seeing someone that cares is the major thing. That's what we train our guys on.
And just a quick clarification,
Okay.
Not anti-SRO, fan of the SRO, but just in terms of going through policies and procedures, you have to look at all the data and all the research around it. and to find that balance between psycho-emotional safety as well as physical safety. That's the main.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think the comments about, we see rise in arrests throughout the country.
That is true.
Well, we got to look at what's the cause of that. Okay, we can't say that because someone was playing music that it escalated. We have to figure out the whole part of that. And usually, what we find is if we do have an arrest at one of our schools, it's something that occurred outside. Every day we have parents calling us. My son was accosted out on 2nd Street. Can you guys do something about it?
Right.
We're the school. Let's be honest. We try to deal with everything that walks through the door. And a lot of times we rely on the resource officer just for some advice, just for a mere face to go down to lunch, sit and have a piece of pizza with them, come to a basketball game and see what's happening. And that helps the Albany Police Department on a daily basis. And I don't know your numbers, Chief, and I used to know them when I was there, but I will tell you that some of the shootings and things that are happening in the city of Albany are on the decline, and I think it's a lot of the stuff that we're doing at the school, because we're actually getting involved and finding these things out through the resource officers program.
All right, thank you. Right now, I think we're at 10:58. So our final words have to be with my dear Amir, to our students. So you have heard all the conversations, and I want you all to have the final word, because guess what? It's your schools. So what's the takeaway from both of our students?
No pressure.
I want to thank Jill for the 2 cough drops, first of all. I just want to say that this has actually been like a really enlightening conversation for me, and I'm so glad that I was able to be a part of it, and I think I learned so much because it's, I'm one of 2,000 students at Shaker, and for me to see what is going on to help with this really, really is amazing. And I don't know if everyone knows here, but I am helping out with the walkout that's happening at Shaker, and I'm working closely with the administration on that, and I want students to know that there is something being done. And I think that it is really important to find the balance between how much physical safety we need and how much mental health services that we need, because those are both big causes of what's going on. And yeah, there's more to be done, and our schools need to be more proactive. And overall, I think that this has been a really, really amazing discussion, and I think that I'm glad that people are not afraid to say what they think, because not everybody's going to agree, and every school is going to do it a different way.
I think it was eye-opening, actually, to see all the parts come together, because you look at it and you see the police side, or you only see the administrative side, but to see that everything came together and we had different perspectives on this, I think that it was an eye-opening experience, and I hope that we were able to take things away from this, and we can move forward to start making changes, because we need to do that. And whether it's proactive and getting together with the students, making relationships, or building communication through the school, the police department, or with other schools, I think that by doing this today, that we started that, and hopefully we can continue on and make a change and stop this from happening.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that I think this is just the beginning, and I think that this is a great discussion, but I think that, in order for us to actually, we have to go out there, we have to leave this room and get something done, because, these ideas are all here, but we can't forget them. We have to act on them as fast as we can, and I'm a senior, and I'm leaving high school, but I would love to see an actual difference being made in the capital region. I have younger siblings that are going through the district, and I think that, yes, discussion is important, and I think I love having everyone here, but we have to go back to where we are and make a difference in our schools and our homes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, panel. Again, out of the mouth of babes comes the truth. So thank you, thank you. I also want to do a round of applause to our wonderful Dan McCoy, our county executive, for bringing us all together and getting this done. And just a reminder, this is not a one and done. So you're probably going to have email or something coming from our wonderful Mary, who is a coordinator for this, helping us get all this together for another conversation, but some action plans coming behind this. So again, this is not a one and done. This is life and realities for our school district. So we say thank you for coming today. Look forward to the next one, and go out there and share the messages that were said in this room today.